Episode 15, Set Up for Success. Sandra bit the bullet and took out her phone. Keith calmly took out his new iPhone and smiled. "Is Google Pay okay for you, Sandra?" Sandra smiled bitterly. All these years, she'd always looked down on her brother and his family, but now her nephew had found a way to force her to return the money she owed them. She realized she'd have to be more careful in front of Keith from now on. In no time at all, almost $50,000 was deposited into Keith's account. He smiled in satisfaction. Ding! You've completed your parents' wish for Sandra to return their money. Wish value +1. Progress 5 of 10. Ding! You've shattered Sandra's wish to not pay you back. Attribute point +1. As the mayor continued to eat, he smiled and said, "Keith, you've such good culinary skills. If you decided to open a restaurant, you would make a fortune." James laughed and said, "If Keith opens a restaurant, I'll eat there every day." The others laughed too, and the atmosphere lightened up again. Keith was silent for a moment before he said, "Actually, there's something that I've been meaning to discuss with you." The mayor smiled and said, "Keith, you're a local hero. If you have a problem, just tell us. We'll do whatever we can to help you." "Well," Keith replied, "I just signed up for the college entrance exam so I can go back to school. If I get in, it means I'll have to resign from the team." There was a stunned silence at Keith's announcement, but the mayor laughed once more and said, "Well, that's great news. It's good that you want to continue your education. With your talent, you can get a degree and go into whatever field you choose. You're setting yourself up for success." James said, "Keith, academic qualifications are certainly important. Are you interested in applying to the police academy?" Keith was a little taken back. He thought that his superiors would be unhappy if he resigned. He hadn't expected them to offer him an olive branch. Keith's parents were overjoyed to see their son treated so well by the city's leaders. It was a great honor, and they couldn't wait to tell their friends all about it. Most importantly, their son finally understood the value of going to college. This was the most pleasant surprise. Sam secretly made up his mind. He was going back to work. He had to provide for his son. Ding! You fulfilled your parents' wish for you to apply to college. Wish value +1. Sandra and her two sons widened their eyes. Travis snorted in disdain. Although he didn't say anything, the meaning was obvious. You think you can get into college? You won't even pass the exams. Everyone had their own thoughts, but Quinn's expression was a little complicated. On one hand, she hoped that Keith would have a better future, but when she thought about Keith resigning, she felt a little uncomfortable in her heart. Suddenly, there was a yelp from the corner of the room. The beautiful camera woman had slipped and fallen to the ground. She seemed to have sprained her ankle. Travis had been taken with her from the moment he saw her, and seeing her hurt, he was the first to rush over to help. The young woman seemed shaken. After being helped by Travis, she blurted out a string of thanks in Spanish. Seeing that the young woman was fine, the mayor laughed and said, "This is Isabella Guzman from our publicity department. She grew up in Ecuador and has come over here to work with us. She's still learning English." Keith nodded, but Travis seemed to want to show off in front of the city leaders. He started speaking to Isabella in Spanish. But even if Travis's grades were good, he didn't have much experience with native Spanish speakers. Isabella blinked, clearly unable to understand what Travis was saying. Seeing this, Keith smiled and stepped forward. In fluent Spanish, he asked if she was hurt and politely helped her over to the couch. It was rare to meet someone of the same age who could communicate fluently with her in Spanish, and Isabella was delighted. Even in Spanish, Keith was witty and amiable, and with his 3-point charm value, he had an undeniable charisma. Isabella laughed at something he said, and the others looked at Keith in surprise before smiling. The mayor said to James, "Keith's Spanish was so good for such a young age. Maybe I should hire him as my secretary." James laughed and said, "You'll have to fight me for him, Mayor Anderson. I think you'd be an outstanding candidate for the police academy." The mayor laughed when he heard that. The more he saw of Keith, the more he liked him. Quinn also looked at Keith. She'd had no idea how talented he was. But when she thought of this charismatic guy flirting with beautiful women, she felt upset. Meanwhile, Travis's mouth was hanging open, and he looked at Keith in disbelief. Travis had always been confident in Spanish, but Keith, the cousin he'd always looked down on, was actually so much better than him. He was so fluent. He could even crack jokes. Those who didn't know him would think he was a native Spanish speaker. But being mercilessly defeated in his field of expertise, Travis was both angry and resentful. But he couldn't do a thing about it. Keith's parents were beaming with joy. Their son was making them proud. Meanwhile, Aunt Sandra and Aunt Mimi's jaws had dropped to the floor. Keith had shocked them to the core. Ding! You fulfilled Isabella's wish to communicate with her peers. Wish value +1. You've shattered Travis's wish to show off in front of a beautiful woman. Ability value +1. Keith's lips curled. After chatting casually for a while, he returned to his seat. Since it was getting late, the guests wrapped up their conversations and then left one after another. Under Quinn's watchful eye, Keith and Isabella exchanged numbers and added each other on Instagram. Sandra and the other relatives also left, with their tails between their legs. Sandra had suffered a huge loss. Not only had she not been able to borrow any more money, but she'd also been made to repay $50,000. After they'd finished clearing up, Keith transferred the $50,000 to his father. They chatted for a while before Keith finally remembered the original point of the evening. He asked, "Dad, didn't you say you had something you wanted to talk about?" Sam rubbed his eyes and sighed. "I almost forgot." He took a letter from a drawer and handed it to Keith. "Take a look." Keith scanned the letter and frowned. It was from his grandfather, and it said that years ago, he had agreed with his close friend that their future children would be engaged when they were old enough. But both families had had sons, and so the arrangement had passed on to their grandchildren instead. Sam sighed and said, "Their grandfather passed away years ago, but his friend kept this letter and never forgot about their arrangement. The letter arrived today. In a few days' time, he'll bring his granddaughter to see you. He's already seen your photo and has your contact details. You should prepare yourself." Keith was well aware that this must be the wife chosen by the system. He hadn't expected it to happen like this, though. It was so old-fashioned. But Keith knew He had been the one to make the wish. All he could do now was accept the consequences.